Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're going to give it till about 11:02 before we officially get started. So hang tight. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Is this the Olympics again? Making a game plan for commuting during the World Cup. This is brought to you by Georgia Commute Options, or GCO. We're a program of the Atlanta Regional Commission and the Georgia Department of Transportation. And I'm Leslie Goldberg. I'm a project manager with GCO, and I'm going to be getting us started today. So this summer, Atlanta is going to host 8 FIFA World Cup matches at Atlanta Stadium. And around those matches, there will also be fan fests and watch parties. And these events are going to come with an influx of travelers on our roads. So here at GCO, our scope is really focused on the commute. And our goal for today is to help you make a commuting game plan for this summer. And we're going to do that by answering a few questions. When and where are things going to be happening around our region? How will the FIFA World Cup be different from other events that are hosted in Atlanta, because Atlanta is a popular event center? Where and how should you expect traffic, and how can you get around to avoid headaches? How can you enjoy the excitement of the event as a local, and how can you prepare your organization, your workplace, your teammates to get folks to work on time with minimal stress during the event? So to answer those questions, we've got a really exciting panel today. We're joined by William Pate, the president and CEO of the Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau. We have Lenor Bromberg, Deputy Commissioner of Engineering with the Atlanta Department of Transportation, and Johan Weber, Program Administrator for Georgia Commute Options at the Atlanta Regional Commission. Welcome to our panel, and welcome to all of you. So a couple of housekeeping notes. Please hold your questions to the end. We will hold a short Q&A, and you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit your questions. You'll also receive a recording of this webinar after it's complete if you registered. So please don't stress about capturing screenshots or taking notes. You will have the entire content available to you as soon as we wrap, maybe a few hours after we wrap. And things are still developing, so we want to make sure that you track our website and our contact information so that if you have questions after this wraps that are not answered by the webinar recording, contact us so we can help you out and help you make a game plan. So with that, I would like to hand it over to our panel. And we're going to start today with William from Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau. William, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And flexibility is the key. So yes, constantly be checking in, and because things are as we get closer, things are definitely moving. If we can go to the next slide, this will be the most exciting slide of the day, which is we're 55 days out. And for those of us who've been working on this since 2017, it's hard to believe it has finally gotten here. And but things are coming together very nicely, as you're going to hear today, and we are definitely ready. One of the great advantages we have, which we were talking a little bit about earlier, is that we have major events in this city almost every year. Not quite as at the scale of this, but very similar. And we do over 1 million visitors every year internationally. So again, we have some understanding of managing, international groups. If you go to the next slide, you can see that the final draw, this is one of the interesting things about FIFA. Our group in Atlanta is Group H, but you'll notice that Uruguay doesn't play in Atlanta. But we do have Congo, Uzbekistan over in Group A. We've got Czechia in South Africa. So this is kind of the intricate calculus that FIFA does when they're planning the tournament draw. And you have to be a lot smarter than me to be able to figure out how all this eventually works out. But the most important thing to understand is in Atlanta, we start out with a group of five, that's five, or group of four, 5 games that we'll begin with. And that will eventually lead to a draw. Thank you very much. That'll lead to a draw that, and here you can see all the different games that we have. We have 10 countries that are going to be here for our 8 countries, I'm sorry, for the first 5 games. And it's really a really nice international mix of folks that we're going to see here in the city. Most all the activity is downtown, although there will be watch parties and things in the metro area. We're expecting about 300,000 unique visitors. That's about 10,000 a day if you want to think about it over the 30-day period of the World Cup. That's very similar to what we see for a Super Bowl in terms of new unique visitors, room nights that we get in. We usually, when we have a Super Bowl, we're usually doing 10 to 12,000 room nights each night in the city. And so when you hear that this is going to be a lot like a Super Bowl, it will be on game day and prior to game day. Now, unlike the Olympics, we have several days in between matches. So in the first rounds, we have a couple of days between matches. Then we get to the round of 32, and we have 5 days in between those, and then we get to the semifinals. So there is space between these games, which is going to allow us to hopefully move visitors all around the metro area so that we spread out that economic impact across the city. About 250,000 of those visitors are going to be from out of state. So this is unlike a lot of events we do, like college football championships and things like that. This is very much driven by out of town visitation. And so a lot of it's going to be airport. There will be some drive in, but most of it's going to be from people who are coming typically by airline. Right now, 20% of the visitors are from out of the country. That's typically on a typical day in Atlanta, that would be about 11%. So we are definitely seeing an international lift inbound to the city. And even though it's an international event and people think of it as an international event, as they should, a lot of what we're going to be doing is focusing on the domestic expats that are here in the country. As an example, Cabo Verde, which is our first match, there are 500,000 expats that live here in the United States. In Haiti, there's 1.1 million. Even Uzbekistan, we have 75,000 Uzbeks that live on the East Coast. And so when you hear about some of the international turmoil and things that are going on, and people worry if that's going to really affect the visitation during the World Cup, remember that a lot of those folks are already here. And in the case of Cabo Verde, as an example, they've never been in the World Cup. So if you're from that country, you're very excited about it. There are 500,000 of them on the East Coast. If 10% of them come to Atlanta, that fills up 2/3 of the stadium. So just understanding the large amount of the math. We have a website for the local committee, local organizing committee that I'd like to give you. It's AtlantaFWC26.com, Atlanta FIFA World Cup 26.com. And like we were just talking about, if you want to hear updates kind of on the move, that's where we'll be posting a lot of updates about things that are going to be going on. Let me talk a little bit about watch parties, because even though the events themselves are really exciting, one of the great things, as I said, about the World Cup is there's a lot of what you would call downtime. And so there are a lot of opportunities for visitors to explore the city, but not just visitors, because we really want to encourage residents to come downtown and be a part of the experience. again, this is a little bit different than some of the other large events we have because FIFA did a worldwide lottery. A lot of the tickets are not going to be for local Atlantans, all right? So, because they're spread out all around the world. So, in order to get the residents to really be a part of what's going on in the city, we've got a lot of activities that are going to be going on. And one of them is right here, which is Centennial Olympic Park. We're going to have Fan Fest in the park. It'll be operating. I'll show you the schedule here in just a minute, but it's going to be operating throughout the tournament. It's free, but you have to get a ticket. So you have to sign up for a ticket. We're going to serve 15,000 folks a day in the park. It's going to be food. It's going to be music, a lot of cultural things inside the park. So even if you don't have a ticket to the game, it's an opportunity to really be able to experience everything that World Cup's going to be. Watch parties are going to happen all over the metro area. FIFA is in the process right now of approving those watch parties. They have to approve them. That process will continue probably till the middle of May, but we're already seeing a lot of those getting approved. So even if you can't get downtown, throughout the metro area, there are going to be plenty of opportunities to see the games and be a part of the activities. We're going to have a lot of cultural events all around downtown. And we're also encouraging visitors, especially international visitors who typically like to explore a region. Because of the downtime, we're also encouraging people to get out across the state of Georgia. There's a lot of time to be able to run down to Savannah, run down to Valdosta, run up to Augusta, wherever, and really explore all the things that the state has to offer. And so we're working in partnership with the state to encourage that travel as we move along. As I said, we've got beyond just Fan Fest, and here are the dates that we've got Fan Fest going. There are also going to be concerts. There are 9 concerts at State Farm Arena that are going to be scheduled throughout the 30 days. So between the watch parties, everything we've got going on in the park, the concerts are going to happen at State Farm Arena, and other events that are going to happen around downtown, Midtown, and Buckhead. There are a lot of things for people to do who don't even have a ticket. And you can go to the other website I would give you is discoveratlanta.com, discoveratlanta.com. And there we are getting all of the events that are going to happen around the metro area and trying to get them in one spot so that it's an easy way for people to go and see exactly what's happening every single day. And then they can plan themselves, plan their travels accordingly. One thing I would echo the chamber is saying, we need people to come downtown. So unlike the Olympics, again, where everybody, kind of stayed away, we want to encourage everybody to come downtown and be a part of the events and things that are going on. It's going to be very easy to get downtown, and there's going to be plenty of parking around town because, as you know, those of you who work downtown, a lot of the offices aren't filled. And so there's a lot of opportunity to park all around downtown, and we need the volume. We need people to come down. And the chamber is also encouraging, if you have an office downtown, encourage your folks to come to work downtown. So while traffic will be typical Atlanta traffic to navigate, and I know we're going to talk about that here in a couple of minutes, it's not going to be foreboding. And so people should be able to get in and out pretty easily. It's going to be a great event. As I said, it's going to be it's going to grow. We're going to start out with the first 5 games. As we move to the 2 knockout rounds, then you're going to start seeing really strong soccer cities. England potentially could be here for the round of 32. We could see Argentina in the round of 16. We could see England, Argentina, Brazil potentially in the semifinal. So as you get to the event, as you get through the month, the crowds are going to continue to build and continue to build, and the excitement is just going to be off the charts. So soccer is very big in Atlanta, as you all know. That's one of the reasons why we were chosen to be a host city here, and it's going to be a great event. And that's the end of my presentation.
Hello, everybody. As Leslie said, I'm Lenor Bromberg with the Atlanta Department of Transportation. I'm going to share a little bit with you about what we've been up to. One of the things that the City of Atlanta is responsible for is preparing a mobility plan that is specifically catered for FIFA. Most of the folks who work for FIFA are not from Atlanta, so they have to gather transportation information from every host city across the US, Canada, and Mexico, basically cram it into one singular document so that they can have an encyclopedia of all things related to transport around the city. We've done that documentation and submitted it for FIFA's final approval just a few weeks ago. And that's been done in coordination with folks at the stadium, Georgia World Congress Center, the airport, our police department, emergency preparedness, as well as MARTA, GDOT, and every other transportation stakeholder, including our micromobility companies that we partner with in order to document not only what we have as existing infrastructure, but anything that we'll be changing or doing modifications to in preparation for the events. So on the next slide, one of the first questions we always get asked is what's going to be closed? Where will I not be able to go? And I'm happy to inform you that there's actually very little that will be closed. Most of the things that will be closed are going to be specifically around the stadium. When the secure perimeter is installed, it will have a slightly larger impact than what we see for most matches or Falcons games that happen at the stadium. One of the biggest changes is the sidewalks that are immediately along the stadium on Northside Drive and on the stretch of MLK that's immediately adjacent to the stadium would be inside that secure perimeter. Luckily, we have lots of available sidewalk on the opposite side of Northside Drive and on the southern side of Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, so we will still have access. But that is one section that is a little bit different than most activations that we have at the stadium. As you'll see, the bridge, which is the bridge over Northside Drive, a pedestrian bridge that connects Vine City MARTA station over to the stadium, will be closed to through traffic. So it is actually inside the secure perimeter on both ends. There will be a security checkpoint immediately adjacent to the Vine City MARTA station, which is why we have selected to have that bridge closed to be able to have a safer space for folks to be able to queue up and enter into the secure perimeter. The road closure you see there immediately north of Vine City MARTA station is Road Street. It's actually a part of the Vine City MARTA operations, and we have gates there, and we close that on a regular basis to through traffic when we have major events at the stadium. The other road closure you'll note is at the very bottom of the screen, and that is the small stretch of the Martin Luther King Jr. Drive bridge that goes from Mitchell Street up to Centennial Olympic Park Drive. It is also closed every time there's an event at the stadium because of its proximity to the stadium itself. The other things that are not shown on this map, actually, if you can go back one for me, Johan, I'm going to point out a couple things that we don't have laid on the map. Traditionally, when we have events at the stadium, there are two other locations that are closed to through traffic. The first is Andrew Young International Boulevard, where it intersects with Centennial Olympic Park Drive. This goes right along the stadium and turns and goes along the frontage of the World Congress Center buildings. It is typically closed to through traffic. However, access to the red deck and to the bus terminal for FIFA operations will be maintained. The other thing that's not shown on here, just because of the way city is built on bridges, is that Mangum Street, which goes up underneath the stadium, will be controlled access and it will be closed to through traffic as well. Next slide, please, Johan. So the other area where we are looking at potential modifications to operations from a transportation perspective, especially vehicular traffic, is going to be around the Fan Fest that William showed the great graphic for. We are expecting, in addition to the 15,000 folks who would have tickets coming in and out of the Fan Fest location, with the anticipated capacity during the matches, probably another 50,000 people on top of that walking through this area. And so, in order to enhance pedestrian safety, we're going to be installing barricades that will widen the sidewalk along the perimeter of the park, specifically along Centennial Olympic Park Drive and Marietta Street, because those are going to be the two sides of the park where we anticipate the highest volume of traffic. And so on the baseline will be that the roads will be fully open to traffic, but we will have lanes narrowed for Centennial Olympic Park Drive. Access will still continue to be provided to all parcels that are on the opposite side of the street from the park. So rest assured that folks will still be able to get to their parking lots, to their places of business, and to their properties. The other thing that will be happening is specific to the Fan Fest activation and the vendor who's going to be putting that on for the World Congress Center. They're going to be needing extra space for what we call back of house. And so along Baker Street, which is on the north side of the park, there will be one lane that they will be surrounding with their secure perimeter. Travel will still be available both directions. There'll be one lane in the eastbound direction and two lanes in the westbound direction, which is very critical to make sure that we've got a flow around that park for folks to be able to access their properties. We're going to go to the next slide, and there's a slight difference on FanFest activation days. So one of the things that William mentioned is that we're going to have FanFest on days other than the matches. So every time we have a match, and then on a number of other days, I think we're up to about 17 now, the Fan Fest will be activated. And because, as I mentioned, we're expecting such a high volume of pedestrians in the area, this is when we're going to activate a little bit more of a impact to the road network. And that is that the northbound lanes on Marietta Street along the park frontage between Centennial Olympic Park Drive and Park Avenue will be closed to through traffic. We'll have variable message board signs strategically placed around the area to be able to divert traffic that wants to go northbound, maybe heading towards Georgia Tech from the downtown area. We will bring them around the park, probably along Ted Turner and Baker Street to get back to Marietta so that we can have that enhanced pedestrian safety along the Marietta Street side of the park. The one thing I want to point out is you'll notice that in the legend we have road closure, but you don't see that color anywhere on the screen. And that's because as of right now, we do not anticipate any full road closures associated with the FanFest location. However, we do recognize that in the case of an emergency, if we have any excessive crowds or we need to be able to respond to an emergency or things that might be happening either around the FanFest, around the stadium, or in between the two, we have additional levels of activation where we will be able to shut those roads down to traffic and be able to control the traffic around those spaces in the event we need to do that. But again, that's just on an as needed emergency response basis. On the next slide, we're going to start to talk about some of the other modes of transportation. And I'm going to start first with something that's actually not on the screen, and that's something that William referred to regarding parking. And he's right. We have an immense number of parking opportunities around the city. I've forgotten what the total number is, but they are so many lots within a half a mile walking distance of the FanFest and the stadium that it's kind of surreal when you see this. But I do want to highlight that there are going to be some parking areas that some folks who are traditional parkers who maybe come to a United match at the stadium will not have access to. There are some parking state lots and structures that the World Congress Center controls that FIFA will be using for their operations. This information is being made publicly. I didn't make a map for it today, but that's something that just before you plan your trip down, you might have to park a little further out to be able to get to a reasonable parking space. But that's one of the things that's amazing about Atlanta and why we're so ready is that the downtown area is so very walkable. If you choose to take a ride share, one of the things that we'll be doing is utilizing the bus lane C that the World Congress Center uses today for rideshare, which is right off of Northside Drive, just north of the stadium. That's probably the largest of our rideshare locations. And then we're working with the South Downtown group who's redeveloping a number of blocks in the South Downtown area. Broad Street is being reconstructed. We're getting ready to actually plan to do the final paving on that. It is very pedestrian oriented. It has a great feel to it. I'm very excited about the final product that we'll be getting. But we'll have a section there that will be also an area where we'll be sending folks from a rideshare pickup perspective. And the general idea is we want folks to walk a little further away from the stadium and from the Fan Fest, maybe a couple of blocks, and then pick up their ride there. So the general messaging will be head towards downtown, get to Ted Turner and maybe a block over, and then you have a much smaller grid system. It's much easier for a car to be able to pull over and pick you up. It's much safer. We have everything well lit, so we're very excited about this. And we've tested this a few times over a few events in the past year, and it seems to be working pretty well. And we'll have some additional signage and so forth to help make sure we can convey that information. There will be a slight difference that we'll show on the next slide when we're talking about FanFest. So the previous slide was match days. That means that FanFest and the stadium are activated. But on days when there's no match and we just have FanFest, we've got a slightly smaller geofence. Still kind of the same principle. We want folks to head towards downtown, head towards Ted Turner, a few blocks over, and pick up their ride over there. As you'll notice, because we're concentrating this more around FanFest, we're not highlighting the Broad Street or the World Congress Center bus lane up at Building C. Those certainly could still be available to you. It's just a little bit harder to get to those from the FanFest location. So we would encourage folks to walk towards downtown. We don't have them go quite as far south as we did when we have the stadium activated. On the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about one of my favorite topics, which is micromobility. The city of Atlanta is, I think we're in the top 4 cities in the country for micromobility use, which is largely our scooters, but also the bike share system that we have. On the screen, you'll see a lot of locations of existing bike racks that we already have in place, as well as a scattering of some micromobility corrals. Those are specifically for bike and scooter parking, and they are kind of placed within the street as opposed to on the sidewalk. We want to encourage folks to not leave their scooters and their bikes on the sidewalk because it blocks for pedestrians, and in many cases they get knocked over. So we are already working not only internally with plans to install the yellow dots that you see on the screen, our new micromobility corrals that we are in the middle of permitting right now, and expect to see those being installed over the next 30 days. But we also are meeting directly with our vendors, both Lime and Bird, on identifying some locations where they can do some branded micromobility spots to be able to bring their users straight in to their strategically placed location. We want those to be, again, within walking distance of the stadium and the Fan Fest, but we also know that that's where we're going to have a really high concentration of pedestrians. And I'm expecting that a lot of visitors are going to think these scooters are very cool, and they may not be avid users. I personally refuse to get on them because I know I'll probably break an ankle. But we want to make sure that we've got safe places for them to get to that aren't intermixed in that high concentration of pedestrian activity. And so we're working on identifying what makes sense for those, as well as just making sure we have ample capacity for people to be able to bring their scooters and park them in a safe space. We're also able to control speed and access. It's a little bit tricky to do because I cannot always keep them out of the roads, but I can make sure that I've got them going slower if they do happen to be on a sidewalk. And then the app will also not allow them to park and disengage if they put them in the wrong location. So those are meetings we continue to have to refine how that will specifically be set up on the various dates of FanFest and matches so that we've got good information we can share with the users. And then continuing on micromobility is bike valet. One of the things the stadium does that's really great is they do offer during a lot of their matches that the Atlanta United have is a bike valet location. They are planning to have that during the matches. You can see the little red triangle right there. It is outside the secure perimeter. So it's really great that we'll continue to be able to have that as a resource. And hope that folks will continue to bike and use the various bike facilities that we've got across the city to be able to get to the stadium. And this is just specific for match days when that will be in operation. Some other projects that we've got going on around the city that do help with mobility in general. The first is that we've partnered with Atlanta Downtown to do an update, a very much needed update to our permanent wayfinding signage across the city. We have the first phase of that is in fabrication and installation right now. I'm very excited about this product. It's going to look great. And it's been a long time, William, right, since we've done any updates to this signage. So very, very excited about that. In addition, on the next slide, we're working with SCAD. The host committee has partnered with them to be able to provide a bunch of temporary signage. And so we're going through a review process with them right now on where these can be placed within our right of way, reviewing that along with our public safety team to make sure that what is being recommended is not something that causes us any issues from a public safety concern. Temporary signage can be very tricky because it can be moved. And so we're making sure that we review that with a good lens on public safety, knowing that we'll have a number of people walking, riding their bikes, et cetera, in the area. In addition to that, we have our own signage that we'll be installing, use of message board signs, et cetera, across the city to be able to make sure that we can get folks where they need to go. The last thing I'm going to touch on super quickly is a lot of the other infrastructure improvements that the city is doing around downtown. What's highlighted on the screen is probably a couple of weeks old. This is showing the corridors that we are performing resurfacing on within the downtown area. This is in addition to our traditional resurfacing program that we do through maintenance funds that we get from the state. To date, or as of last week, we had paved about 53, 54 miles of a little over 76 that we plan to resurface in downtown. This includes doing new striping. In many cases, we are actually changing the striping that is out there today to include additional corrals, to include better defined parking, bike lanes, etc., to make sure that not only the people driving in town, but the people walking and riding and scooting in town know where they're supposed to be and can get to their destination safely. We also have broad locations of sidewalk repair and ADA ramp replacement across the city that was identified as a part of an older asset inventory that we did. We're actually updating it right now and continuing to find locations that need to have some treatment. We are also restriping intersections that are not covered by the lines that you see on the map. So within the downtown area, if we aren't resurfacing, we've identified locations where the striping needs to be enhanced. The crosswalks need to be better, have better visibility. The lane marking so that folks know where they're supposed to be, where they're supposed to stop at those intersections is more clearly defined. We are, as I mentioned, we're also looking at additional micromobility corrals and a lot of mural crosswalks. We have about a couple, maybe a dozen or so locations that the city is advancing through our Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, as well as city planning. And then we also have Georgia State University, and I believe one other applicant has come in for additional crosswalks that they want to do enhancements of to better identify their campuses and locations. We also are making a big investment in lighting, not just regular street lighting, but we are also working with Georgia Power and some other partners on some other innovative and decorative lighting at key locations and neighborhoods that are surrounding this activity area to just make things look a little bit brighter as you're coming in and out of the city. And then signal upgrades, signal maintenance, some enhancements, and making sure that our signal operations team, which is largely led by our Georgia Department of Transportation partners, but we also have our own traffic control center that we're able to work in conjunction with them to make sure that traffic will be able to flow. As William said, it will be same as always. We'll have a few extra visitors. They'll probably be a little lost. But we do expect that the transportation system will continue to operate as it does every single day, and we'll be ready to pivot where we need to when things do happen. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Johan.
Thanks, Lenore. Thanks, Leslie, and thank you all for joining and for the opportunity to talk about commuting during the World Cup this summer. So I'm Johan Weber, part of the Atlanta Regional Commission Georgia Commute Options team. And in preparing for this, I wanted to kind of give everybody some points of comparison. So this presentation is going to try to give you some data, some insights, some suggestions to help navigate and kind of wrap your heads around what commuting might look like during the period of the World Cup matches, the Fan Fest, et cetera. So to kind of anchor us, some of this is stuff you've just heard about, the Fan Festival days, the Fan Festival capacity, the 8 matches that we're hosting. But just to give a sense of scale, the projections are for around 65,000 spectators per match, which is a little less than the peak capacity. Likely those latter matches will be at or close to the stadium capacity, which for a soccer setup is about 73,000 people. To give a point of comparison to that, we looked at a bunch of large events, and you'll see data broken out for a few of those large events, but it does not capture all of the ones that we dove into the traffic data for. But as some comparisons, the Copa America opening match, which we will talk about a fair amount, that was about 70,000 fans. The College Football Playoff National Championship, 77,000 fans. Dragon Con is about 75,000 people across 4 days. And then the Beyonce's Cowboy Carter Tour, that was 200,000 fans across 4 days. These are all some of the points of comparison that we'll give. But I think this does kind of capture what you heard Williams mention. Atlanta hosts quite a lot of very large events on a pretty regular basis. And the nice thing is that gives us the opportunity to look at some of that data to understand what actually happens around some of those events and use that to then provide some informed recommendations or suggestions for all of you who are trying to understand, well, what does this mean for commuting, or how can I kind of plan appropriately around this? So I'll spotlight a few quick events, and then we're gonna deep dive into the one that we think is maybe the most reasonable analog. So to kind of anchor you here, this is GPS data. This is basically traffic speed data. If you look at it at a glance, it probably looks familiar to you because this is what you're maybe used to if you look at Google Maps or Waze to look at traffic. In this case, it's historical data, and we're actually going to look at it in a fair amount of detail. There's a legend there to anchor you, but really a simple way to think about this is color-coded. If you see red, it means that traffic is moving, 60% or lower. That what we call free flow speed. In other words, like if there's not a lot of other cars around you, what is the normal speed along that corridor? And then you can see the orange, yellow, and green, and so on. So that gives you kind of an anchor of like, if you see green, it means things are flowing smoothly. And then if you see red, it means that there's some meaningful amount of congestion happening on that corridor. And then the yellow box at the bottom is for those who are curious. We've put some MARTA ridership data in there too, so you can see how many folks were using MARTA through those 4 core stations for that same event and that baseline date. An important note as I go through this, I won't talk about every single thing in all these slides. There's a lot of information. We wanted to make this a resource, so you will be able to go back, check these slides, check the recording. If you want to dive into any of this in more detail, you have that available. But the big focus here is, giving you the anchor of what some of these look like, and looking at both the event date, which in this case is on the left. So this is College Football Playoff National Championship, 6 o'clock. So this is fan arrival. And then compared to the baseline, which is a week prior, same day of the week, same time of day. And you can see the difference that has. The stadium super block, of course, there's a lot more congestion around that block. Those are all the fans making their way into the stadium. And then one important note that you'll see looking at the baseline is, yes, there is congestion at 6 p.m. This is a Monday. You will see congestion along the connector. In fact, there's actually more congestion that happened on that baseline day. And that's because of all the other things that drive, just congestion activity within our region. So in this case, it actually happened to be the case that if you were a commuter passing through most of downtown, it actually was smoother on the championship day. It was just much more congested immediately around the stadium. Another comparison here this is Beyonce. This is the most congested evening of the Beyonce tour. And you can see, there is a lot of activity. There is a fair amount of congestion within that downtown core at that peak fan arrival, which in this case was 6 p.m. You can compare this to a week later, same day of the week, same time of day. Again, freeway congestion, roughly analogous, but you see some more of that downtown activity with fans. Slightly different, certainly different time of the day and day of the week. This is Dragon Con during the parade. So you see, this is what it looks like downtown. There's a fair amount of activity, fans, visitors making their way to and from, and then you compare that to the baseline. And in this case, there's very little congestion happening on a Saturday morning, so the baseline is very green. But again, these are just examples to showcase, these are big events that downtown absorbs on a semi-regular basis. But let's talk about one that we think is maybe the most useful and direct analog, which is the Copa America opening match in 2024. This is June 20th. This happened to be an evening match, so 8 p.m. start. And we're going to dive into this in some more detail so you can kind of see how this plays out. So we'll start off by showing this is 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock is the peak fan arrival period for this particular event. And you compare it to the baseline 1 week prior, same day of the week, same time. You can see how much less congested it happens to be at 7 p.m. in downtown. But you can see that, again, that congestion is very centered around fans, in that stadium super block. You can see MARTA ridership very, very high on that actual match day across the 4 stations. Not surprising, MARTA ran additional routes for a lot of these events. That's an important part of them supporting those events going smoothly. So let's look at, and this is one of the things that maybe will stand out more and we'll talk about in detail. There's fan arrival and then there's also fan departure. This is one of the bigger differences. This was, again, an evening match. So our baseline, looking at 11 o'clock in the evening, there's very little congestion in downtown. Not surprising. We're not talking a bunch of commuters. We don't have a lot of other trip generation happening at 11 p.m. on a weeknight, but there's a lot of activity when it comes to departing this match, and you can see that. And what I'm going to do to actually help make this a little clearer is I'm going to play a little video here. So this is the baseline traffic. I'll play. This is a very short one. So this is what it looks like on that regular day. You can see all of the commuting activity that makes its way through downtown, the freeway activity that you see, and it kind of lightens up, and we kind of get through the peak PM period. 7 o'clock, it starts to be, fits and starts of some, intersection delays, but it's pretty smooth throughout the evening. And certainly by the time we get into, 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, we're talking pretty smooth throughout. And now we're going to compare. So this is the, This is the opening match. So again, the match starts at 8. So we're here. This is, rush hour peak periods. You can see there's a lot of activity downtown, a lot of commuting activity. Fan arrival, you see how much more congested it becomes around the stadium. I'm actually going to pause here. So one thing that we see, fan arrival tends to peak about an hour out for these matches, but it does start, as you saw in this data, earlier than that. 2 hours or even a little bit more is what we see in some of this data. And I'm going to get us here into, so this is the match is actually underway at 8 o'clock. And you can see there's actually less congestion in the area around the stadium than there was before, and certainly then we'll see afterwards, which makes sense. Fans are inside the match at this point, so it's actually not, it's not nearly as congested in that area around. And now we're going to get the matches running. And now the match is going to end at 10, and you're going to see all of the fans starting to depart and make their way out into the freeway. And by 11 o'clock and then 12 a.m., you see, things have kind of settled back again. But there's that sort of rush of folks making their way out of the stadium. Just to get, super detailed for those of you who, are working downtown or interested in the details of downtown, the corridors to plan around some congestion are not likely to be a surprise. Looking at all of these, different events laid out next to each other, they are going to be, Northside Drive, Centennial, Mitchell, Ted Turner, Trinity, et cetera. And, if you work along some of those corridors or those are parts of your commute journey, certainly you will want to be particularly attentive to some of the suggestions that we're going to make in just a moment. But I also wanted to be attentive not just to downtown. We've got a lot of folks who are very interested in what does this look like regionally. And I think this is largely good news for folks. The smaller boxes here are your baseline dates. So again, this is for Copa America. Looking at that 7 and that 11 p.m. That we looked at in detail before. The takeaway here is, if you look at those smaller boxes, we have regional congestion. We are a big, very, very active economic region. We have lots of folks going from one place to another. It's all folks like all of us, making their way around from work to school, all of the other places that we go. And that does lead to just congestion. And we see that, at any given day, we will have congestion in this, pretty similar pattern day to day. And when we look at the events, it's not very dissimilar to what we see when we look at the regional data. Again, we said, at 11 o'clock, there are all these fans leaving the stadium, and you can see it's more congested downtown than it is at a normal 11 o'clock, but it's not this dramatic, spread of red across the entire region. And similarly for 7 o'clock, there is, you do see some more red in that map on the left, but frankly, that varies a lot, event by event, where there are not very consistent patterns that every time there's a large downtown event, we see, freeways across the region come to a grinding halt. Largely, we have a network that is able to absorb that quite reasonably. And usually when we see, traffic events on some of these other roads, they're much more localized things like, crashes, collisions, or closures. So I'm going to talk about some recommendations, just maybe some strategies to help folks plan and navigate around the World Cup matches. This is one of our biggest ones. We've put the matches here. These are your 8 matches laid out, the core hours of the day. The matches are in blue. Those are the 2-hour kind of expected run times. There's the 90 minutes of the match, halftime, and stoppage time. So think usually it's about 2 hours. The match is not, again, not a bad time. If you are downtown and you need to run an errand, that's a good time to do it, which is nice. You can go get lunch if it's a 12 p.m. match. But those red windows on either side, when fans are arriving or when fans are departing, you should expect that there will be, noticeably more delay than you would otherwise experience if you are anywhere, around the stadium area. And then there's an additional window in that what you see in that orange, folks that are arriving a little earlier. Again, we start to see arrival congestion, probably more like 3 hours out. It just starts to become much more noticeable in that 2-hour block. Similarly, when fans are leaving. 5 of our matches are midday, so you see there's kind of a core recommendation there, and then we have some evening matches. But really, where you see circled in red, if you can, plan your commute to try to avoid some of those times. Come in a little earlier those days, avoid leaving, especially during that 2 to 4 window. Maybe you can, adjust your schedule or flex your schedule to leave, before that 2 p.m. window, finish your day out at home. Or, if you're a shift-based work, try to adjust your shifts if you can at all, so that you're not having folks arrive or depart during those peak windows, because it's much less likely that they will be reliably on time. If you want to mitigate any of the headache or any of the uncertainty that's created, and this is your sort of cheat sheet to try to plan around those match times, and for each of the different matches, because again, there's some variety in when they happen. So that's our kind of general recommendation for timing. I do want to put one important note. I mentioned, regional traffic it's not consistently impacted by these big events. But there's one big asterisk on that I think is worth us all kind of keeping in mind, which are motorcades. What you see visualized here on the right is actually another large event that we hosted. It is the same day as one of the other Copa America matches in 2024. But that was not the event that actually led to this dramatic regional congestion. You see congestion along the vast majority of our freeways in Metro Atlanta. The reason for that, and you can probably figure it out if you see the dark black line there, is we had a motorcade that had to progress, or motorcades that had to progress from Dobbins Air Force Base down into Midtown for the presidential debate that occurred that evening. Motorcades such as that require a full closure of the roadway, and they have big ripple impacts across the rest of the network. Now, at this point, we do not have the ability to know what dignitaries will arrive or travel for some of these matches, what would be involved in their passage, whether they'll fly into Hartsfield and have a police escort, whether there's going to be anybody who would fly into Dobbins. There are uncertainties. Some of it can be, sort of projected a bit based on, what potential teams we're talking about. But the simplest recommendation is just to say, expect some surprises. If you are traveling, if you're making your way around the region on the day of the semifinal or some of these other things, maybe plan to avoid that window in advance of the match and after the match, just in case, there are VIPs or other folks that are traveling around the region. It's just going to give you a safer experience. If you see anything on the news about dignitaries planning to visit Atlanta, maybe check in with that information and say, okay, does this look like that might impact, me on 7585 coming up from the airport, for example. But just a general rule of thumb, if you're making your way, their teams will find their way from Buckhead to downtown for the matches. That won't be as dramatic, but there will be, some escorting, some signal priority for them. And so that, there may be some temporary slowdown. So again, just sort of plan and expect surprises. Our third recommendation for commuters, if you can, leave the car at home. This is an awesome time to make use of our transit network. If you have not heard, MARTA will be running their trains every 5 minutes on match days. That's wild. That's like living in New York levels of frequency. And we have 23 stations that have free daily parking. So if you work downtown or in Midtown or in some of these other employment centers, and you just don't want to have to worry about who's moving where and whether there are surprises and what congestion is going to be like, take advantage of our transit system. It's going to be a really great experience. And even if you're on a busy train with a lot of fans, it's going to be a lot better than sitting in traffic with a lot of fans. Certainly a lot more exciting, a lot more fun. And then also shout out always to our express commuter bus, which is another option if you're coming in from further out into the suburbs. It's a great time. Those 8 match days, just offload that stress, let somebody else drive, experience transit, maybe use that as an opportunity to try something different and just, again, offload some of that headache. So my last slide here, Thinking about your organizations, I know many of you are, with an employer or part of an employer organization, and we can kind of distill these again, three, I think, pretty simple recommendations. Number one is make a game plan for your workforce. If you are near the stadium or one of the other fan venues, use your schedules as a tool to give people a better experience. Shift your schedules, work with your workforce, try, move that day earlier or later, or adjust that schedule around some of those match times. If you can, maybe it's good to do a half day remote, or maybe, when we get to those final big elimination rounds, if you feel like it makes sense for your organization to leverage some remote work or flex work those days, consider those as tools in your toolkit. But generally, we feel like if you can plan appropriately around when the activity is high, you have a lot of options available as a workplace. You don't have to be, keeping everybody at home all 8 matches or all 18 Fan Fest days or anything like that. You have tools to have a smooth experience. Number two, you all on this webinar are now some of the best informed people in Metro Atlanta. So please share that. Please help your employees by sharing, the URL you see here, or georgiacommuteoptions.com/World Cup. We have a lot of the graphics you've seen here. The resources are online there. Please share them with folks so that they can plan around those matches too and know what to expect. If there are other resources, things that would be helpful for your workforce, just reach out to us, shoot us a message. We are happy to see if there's something else that we can package to help you support your workforce and your employees to have a smoother experience. Because frankly, I think this is going to be a great opportunity. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of big excitement. The biggest risk is if folks don't know what to expect and they don't know what they could have planned around. And that's something that we have 55 days to prepare for. Lastly, our program, Georgia Commute Options, we are a free resource. We're funded by the Georgia Department of Transportation. If you don't have any other commute program, or you want to talk about a transit program or other resources and support, we are always here. So with that, I'm going to close out my slides, and I think we can take some questions, right, Leslie?
Yes, thank you to our panel, and thank you to all of you for attending our webinar. I hope you feel as informed as I do about when to expect activity and what resources are available. So yes, we do have a few questions in the queue for our panel. The first one, I think Lenor is probably going to be best equipped to handle, but it's for everyone. There's a lot of concern about public safety surrounding these matches and events. So our first question would be, what sorts of public safety resources are going to be available around the World Cup events?
That's an awesome question. And that's something that ATL-DOT, we've been working closely with not only our APD, but our Mayor's Office of Emergency Preparedness. And we have had all agency planning meetings that has included not only other local partners from Cobb County, Gwinnett County, et cetera, but also our federal partners as well, who will be participating with us during the entire tournament to make sure that not only our public safety teams are aware of information they might need, but also to help us adjust with our staffing. We will be business as usual. One of the things that we just shared with our council yesterday is that especially for APD, we will be full force. All of our trainees will be actively helping, but not in training. We'll be pulling folks out of training, professional development activities, which we consider non-essential during these times, to be able to make sure that we've got staff specifically around the stadium. We'll also be leaning on other outside resources to help us specifically around the stadium area on match days when we're going to have the biggest influx of pedestrians and drivers into the area. And that means that we can allow for our operations that we normally have in all of our other zones to maintain that same staffing level. So while I think you'll see some more officers, we also have a new uniform we'll be using to make it more visible for folks who may not recognize an APD officer uniform. They've got a little bit more of an international flair, so that we hope that our visitors will be able to recognize in the event that they need an officer's assistant. They'll be able to track them down and find them. So I think you'll see a few more folks, but normal operations for us around any of these major events that we do.
Awesome. Thank you, Lenor. This next question might be a fun one. Is there any effort to help Waymo cars not get misdirected in all of the traffic congestion downtown?
I actually have a meeting with them tomorrow. So I think it's tomorrow. But yes, one of the things we're working on is that something we're very concerned about. We've obviously had some mishaps with Waymos around the city. They are a blessing, but they can also be, quite a challenge for us to be able to deal with. So we're working through that to see what we need to have in place to be able to make sure that we're able to address any issues that there might be with Waymo. Again, it's one of those things where we'll be ready. One of the things that I didn't mention earlier, Georgia Department of Transportation, their signal operations teams manages all of the signals across the Metro Atlanta region. And then we also have, in conjunction with that, a camera system that is owned and operated by the state. We also have our own, through our police department, a camera system. And so we are able to tap into those in the traffic control center that the City of Atlanta Department of Transportation has here in City Hall to be able to monitor what's happening around the city and the region when we're using those state cameras. And so that gives us the opportunity to be able to take an action if we need to in the event something like that might happen, rather than waiting for someone else to take care of it. And we'll have direct communication with Waymo in those instances to be able to address those items.
Great. Thanks again, Lenore. This question might be best for William. There's, in addition to the games, there's a lot of fan events and watch parties around the metro area. One of our participants wonders if the watch parties are going to be held for all of the games or only the ones being held locally.
They will be held for games besides the ones that are here in Atlanta. I don't know what the exact, every watch party venue is different. Some are very aggressive and are going to show a lot of the games, and others are going to be sort of in and out sporadically. The best thing to do is go to AtlantaFWC26.com. That's the host committee's website. And as FIFA approves watch parties, those will be loaded onto that website. And as I told you, that process is going to go probably through the middle of May because FIFA has to approve all of those, and not just in Atlanta, but all the cities across the country. And so, but as those come live, they'll be posted on that website. That's the best place to see which ones are approved. But I can tell you that the plan is very aggressive across the metro area. A lot of folks are looking to have watch parties, and they won't just be for games in Atlanta.
Thank you, William. So here's another question for our participants. How far out from the soccer match venues should we expect pedestrian impacts when we think about tourists seeking places to eat, places to stay? What's sort of the splatter zone, if you will?
I'll be happy to take that one because I am a participant of a lot of the major events that happen in downtown and know how walkable it is. One of the things I find very interesting, and I'm not sure many people recognize this, but the downtown hotel district, all of those hotels are within a mile and a quarter of the stadium, which is a very easy walk. So I do anticipate, especially if we have a lot of folks who are visiting from outside of town, staying in those hotels, that you'll see a heavier a volume of folks that are walking around between those hotels and all the restaurants, and then over towards the activity center by Centennial Olympic Park. But I would say that's probably where you'll see the core of it. The other thing I will add is that we do have teams who will be staying in Buckhead. So there, I would expect, because of the Buckhead proximity, that you might see some increase in pedestrian activity in and around the hotels and the eateries up in that area. And obviously, Midtown's not very far away. And because, as Johan pointed out, we have incredible stop locations along MARTA. One of the things we're encouraging folks is stay in Midtown, stay in Buckhead, get on MARTA and come into town. And so we expect to see a little bit of an outlie of some other pedestrian activity associated with connections between the hotels and those MARTA stations. And Johan, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
No.
Well, then, Johan, I'll let you field the next one. Is there an opportunity for agencies to work with GCO to find resources for their employees, especially during these high traffic times?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we really encourage, if there's, a resource that you think your workforce needs, or your organization or community would benefit from, certainly reach out to us. If it's something that we can support, we'll be happy to do so. If you're interested in sharing resources that you have out with folks, also reach out to us. We can talk about what channels and paths we have to reach folks, but we want to make sure that anything that's helpful for people to be able to plan and have a good experience this summer, that we can share that with people.
Thank you, Johan. And thank you to the panel. We are right about at time, so I apologize that we couldn't get to all the questions on our list. I will direct you to our World Cup landing page for GCO. You can visit us at gacommuteoptions.com/world-cup. That link will also be in your follow-up email from this webinar, so you'll get a reminder of it along with the recording. Thank you again for joining us today. Let's all work together to keep Atlanta rolling during the World Cup and have a great event. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Ready.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.